anointing of Saul, a detailed account. The story of Saul's anointing as the first king of Israel is a significant moment in biblical history, marking the transition from the period of the judges to the era of the monarchy. This narrative, found in the books of 1 Samuel, highlights the interplay of divine guidance, human agency, and the consequences of leadership choices. The demand for a king. As Samuel, the last judge of Israel, grew old, the Israelites became increasingly concerned about their future leadership. Samuel had appointed his sons, Joel and Abijah, as judges, but they were corrupt and failed to follow their father's righteous example. Dissatisfied with their leadership, the elders of Israel approached Samuel at Ramah and demanded a king to lead them, like all the other nations. The request displeased Samuel, as it represented a rejection of God's direct rule over Israel. However, when Samuel prayed to God, the Lord instructed him to listen to the people, emphasizing that their demand for a king was not a rejection of Samuel, but of God himself. God warned that the establishment of a monarchy would lead to the people's oppression under a king's rule, but he nevertheless allowed them to have their way. God's choice, Saul. God guided Samuel to anoint Saul, a young man from the tribe of Benjamin, as the first king of Israel. Saul was described as an impressive and handsome man, standing taller than anyone else in Israel. Despite his physical attributes, Saul's humble beginnings and his initial reluctance to assume kingship made him an intriguing choice. Saul's first encounter with Samuel occurred when he was searching for his father's lost donkeys. Samuel, having been divinely informed of Saul's arrival, invited him to a meal and later anointed him privately, pouring oil on his head and declaring that the Lord had chosen him to lead his people. This act symbolized God's empowerment of Saul for his new role. Public selection and early success. After this private anointing, Samuel called the people of Israel together at Mizpah to publicly select their king. The process involved casting lots, and Saul was chosen from among all the tribes and families. Initially, Saul was hiding among the baggage, a sign of his modesty or possibly his fear, but when he stood among the people, his towering stature made him immediately recognizable as king material. Saul's early reign was marked by military success, particularly in his victory over the Ammonites, which solidified his position as king and won him the people's support. After this victory, Samuel formally reaffirmed Saul's kingship at Gilgal, offering sacrifices to the Lord and celebrating the new era in Israel's history. Saul's disobedience and rejection. Despite his promising start, Saul's reign was marred by a series of disobediences to God's commands. One notable incident occurred when Saul faced the Philistines at Gilgal. Samuel had instructed Saul to wait 7 days for him to arrive and offer sacrifices to seek the Lord's favor before battle. However, when Samuel delayed and Saul's troops began to scatter, Saul took matters into his own hands and offered the sacrifices himself. When Samuel arrived, he rebuked Saul for acting foolishly and not keeping the command of the Lord. He prophesied that Saul's kingdom would not endure and that the Lord had sought a man after his own heart to lead his people. This marked the beginning of Saul's decline and God's rejection of him as king. Saul's disobedience was further demonstrated when he failed to completely destroy the Amalekites and their king, Agag, as God had commanded. Instead, Saul spared Agag and the best of the livestock, justifying his actions by claiming he intended to offer the livestock as sacrifices to God. Samuel confronted Saul again, declaring that obedience to God was more important than sacrifice, and reiterated that the Lord had rejected Saul as king. Conclusion. The anointing of Saul as Israel's first king illustrates the complexities of human leadership under divine sovereignty.